Voices podcast. My name is Deja Borns.
I'm Jaron Langford.
My name is Christopher McDavid.
My name is Maya Broby.
My name is Damari Borns.
And our topic we're going to be talking about today is racial profiling. So my question to y'all is, how do you feel about it? And for an example, the Ferguson, Missouri, with the Michael Brown case.
So I feel like that whole case was just crazy because he didn't do anything. He was just taking the train with his girlfriend at the time, and they had a young girl at home, and then they had they were on the subway and they had shut down the subway, and they pulled him off the train, and then they said that he was resisting when he really wasn't, and they had shot him. So now just thinking about it is that his daughter never got to have daddy-daughter time and all that other stuff, and he was taken from the world too soon. So I believe that they had no motive for it, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, and it's sad because all his daughter is gonna know is that her father is gone for the wrong reason. He didn't do anything wrong, so she doesn't really remember the relationship because she's too young to remember. But she just knows she's gonna know her dad isn't there, and it's not his fault.
So, how do you feel about racial profiling, and you see it in the news and in the media and stuff like that? But what cases do you know of racial profiling, and how has that impacted you, even if you don't know the person?
Well, one recent movie that came out, Just Mercy, talks about racial profiling in a different light. So death row cases. So when we talk about death row cases, it's do people really deserve to die? So for what they did. So in that movie, one of the cops said that they knew that he was guilty just by looking at him. So what exactly does that mean? Is it the color of his skin? Is it just the way he looked? Did he look guilty? So, and plus you can't even do that off of the way somebody looks, because it's not right.
Looks can be deceiving.
Looks can be deceiving.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen the movie Just Mercy, but based on everything that I've seen growing up here so far, I'm really now getting to experience this new culture shock of racism and stuff like that. And from my observation for the 9 months that I've been here, it's a really serious threat to all black lives, because I've done research on this topic, and it is shown that police brutality against African Americans is the number one death, the reason of death. So it's a really bad thing, and it's really impossible to cure, but at least by talking about it, we can solve it.
I know what you're saying. I think solving it by talking about it's going to be a lot more it's going to be very difficult. I think we need to bring light to it, and once people recognize that it's happening, then people will act, because a lot of people don't know or don't believe that racial profiling is a thing, and they choose to put themselves in the dark when it comes to topics like this. So if we can just educate them or bring light onto these topics, then maybe it'll help progress. Maybe it'll help give us some progression in said topic.
So racial profiling, how do you I'm not gonna say view it, but how do you see it as a problem, and how can we educate those people on it, and for the people that subconsciously don't know that they're being racially profiling or they're being racist? How can we shed light to those people that don't really know that they're doing it by accident, or
Well, as I said before, just speaking about it right now is taking the first step, but at the same time, it's really actually difficult to eradicate this, because it's more of a virus than a social issue, because the more that people grow up and teach their kids these same things over and over, the ignorance just spreads throughout the generations. So that's why it's it's a very, very impossible thing to eradicate. But for now, we could just try. Speaking about it is the first step.
I do.
You can go.
Okay. I do agree with that. Trying to change somebody's subconscious bias is very difficult because they're doing these things without realizing that they're doing them. So I think in order for us to educate them, we have to get them to try and actively think, like really think about what they're doing. Just the small things like gripping your bag if a colored person walks past, they have to actively think about it so they can try and relieve themselves of these subconscious biases.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think for communication, like, it should be all races all races would have to come together and like have a seminar on racial profiling, so they could all be on the same page and everybody can be educated. That way, everybody knows what's going on and they can try to solve it the proper way.
Okay, so a 16-year-old boy was just killed a few days ago. How does that impact you and your peers?
I think it's in terms of like violence in of itself. I don't know much about the case, but I know just based off of being 16, he was much too young to go. And do you know who he was killed by?
I don't know for sure.
It's said that people know, but it's not being like they're not saying anything. But yeah, a lot of people I know are affected by that happening because they all grew up together. So it's kind of hard. Like, I'm trying to be there for everybody, but it's kind of hard watching everybody just like crumble because there's a lot of deaths happening, a lot of murder. So everybody's just like, they're trying to be strong, but it's hard for kids. You're 14, 15, 16 to try to deal with what's going on and how to not be violent about it, because everybody wants to be violent and do something, but they have to, be calm and try to fix their inner self.
And when children seem to go through that at a young age, they start to deal with that over and over and over again. Like, them losing friends is just like one step into them just going into that endless cycle of just trauma. So if we keep exposing these kids to that, then it's just gonna bring more hurt to them when they go on to the future, and especially if we don't deal with it as of now.
And I think that ties back into the racial profiling, because if they are traumatized, then they're going to fall back into those violent cycles. And I'm talking specifically of colored kids who've experienced this trauma. They'll fall back into those cycles of violence, and it'll just make it so people of color seem more susceptible to do something that is violent. And this is why people think that people of color are more naturally more violent, because we can't get the help that we need to cure ourselves of this trauma and to educate ourselves on how to help ourselves do better. So I think that's where a lot of time we're getting profiled, because we've been shown to be violent because we can't cure ourselves of the trauma that we're enduring.
Yeah, but at the same time, we must also accept that most of this blame does fall on us, because these stereotypes were created due to things that we have done in our past. Even though they weren't good things or acceptable, we have to understand that our ancestors and past generations have done stuff that have put us in this position to be where we are today.
But still, saying that our ancestors have done stuff like that, it doesn't make it acceptable for stereotypes we shouldn't accept the stereotypes.
Exactly.
We should try to change them, rewrite the narrative.
Yeah, but that's the thing. The way how our generations are growing up, they're thinking that all of this is a norm. For example, violence is a norm. Death is a norm. Holding a gun, carrying a gun, selling drugs is a norm. So we can't just only think of it as they being racial profiling and stuff like that towards us. We must also accept the fact that we are doing something wrong and we need to be the change.
So how exactly could we be that change? Because I know we talk about being the change and how we can change some people's minds, but how exactly can we do that?
I think, well, relating back to like the murder and the trauma that the kids are facing, first they would have to learn they would have to get help and to learn how to healthfully like control what's going, like what they're feeling, their pain, and then they would be able to further that, and then they would be able to help the community grow. Because some children, they don't get the proper treatment on how to deal with the trauma that they experience, so they're just hurt and they go out to do the things that like killing, holding guns, joining gangs and stuff like that. Instead of being helped, when they're helped, they're able to bring back positivity into their community.
But it's not. It's that's right. But the treatment and also getting people to realize that healing not the way that you usually think, and it's not usually retaliation and all the other violence. It's like getting that help first, because you can stop this cycle by going to a counselor or something, like some other therapist. And not all therapists are like white, or you know, there are black counselors that help, that because you know we have that stigma where it's just like the counselors that we see are white, but there's also black counselors that are willing to help, and that we need to advertise more, and that we should have more life skill programs for kids in school, because we don't know anything beyond high school, like learning for financially how to save, and like going to college, what you need to do to prepare for college, and all that other stuff. Like, we don't have that in place, so we're just going into the world just trying to figure it out by ourselves. So that's what we also need in the community, because not a lot of people are knowledgeable about the different resources that are there to help.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think, and I agree with Chris too, I think we do need to take the first step if we're going to get any progress into changing the way that people think. I do think we need to take the first step by going to those black counselors, or going into those life skills programs, because because white people, I don't think, are going to change anytime soon unless we try and help them change. So if we take the first step into change, then we can show them that we're willing to help them change their thinking. And so I think that we do need to take the first step into going into this change.
I feel like white people are like willing to help, but it's just like there's a smaller percentage of them that are willing to help, because it's not always like all white people are racist, all white people are this.
For sure.
But it's more like who is actually willing to help, and who is doing it because they feel bad for us. Like for example, how you said subconsciously they don't really know. It's the way they are brought up. So like helping them, like seeing other people that are willing to help us, and to change the narrative and all that other stuff. It's like for the bill that was passed for African Americans to be a part of the curriculum, Black History. There was actually white people that were really like pushing towards that bill, because they feel like we need to know more about our culture. So it's just like we can't really put them all into one category. We have to separate them, because I was actually like really like not proud, but I was very moved by like how many people were there to try to help us learn about our history and learn about expand their knowledge about what we went through, and how we can try to change that from like moving forward.
Just to clarify, I don't think most white people are racist. I think a lot of them are ignorant in terms of our struggles and what we've had to come up doing. So I think if we can educate them on how hard our lives are, then that's our push to help them understand.
Yeah, but at the same time, remember, you must think of it like this. We don't want them to be sympathetic, because sympathy just brings forth like them just giving us things like out of their free will, because they're like this person is going through a struggle. So it's just like if you see somebody in need on the side of the road and who needs money to, eventually, we don't want them to see us as that. We want them to see us as equals, of which we are our brother's keeper, and we're just helping. So.
And also, somebody can grow up, a white person can grow up in a racist household and not know that parent is necessarily racist. So when that go back to the education piece. So when they go back into school and start learning, all they learn about black people is that they were slaves, and they're like, oh, how'd they get to this much power? How is there a black person teaching me? That doesn't make sense. So it also goes back into the education piece. You have to educate the white people as to how black people have gotten here and what we've been through, because it's not just enough to say that black people were slaves. Oh, that's it. Now let's move on to World War II. It doesn't make sense.
That's exactly how it works, because even I have realized that in your teaching system, you'll skip past all of the glories of the blacks. Anything that makes us who we are, that represents our success, it's skipped. Cause I've been doing the Civil War movement right now, and there was a key aspect on how we won World War One and World War Two, and there were African American military units that played important role in the success, and they didn't even mention it in the textbooks.
Yeah, so like talking about that too, we had a civil rights movement, but it was just like we didn't really talk. We touched up on Martin Luther King, like we all know about that soon, and but then we moved on to like hippies and all that other stuff, and the whole drug epidemic about that piece, and then it was just like, what else happened and all that other stuff. So like I feel like black, the high school I went to, we have like African American history and culture, and we have African American literature, but they're electives. They're not a part of the curriculum. You have to go and put it in as you want to take this class. So like what I learned from those classes was my African American history and culture teacher was white, and my African American literature teacher was black. But I learned two different things from history and culture and from literature, because she touched up on way more that I didn't know than my history and culture teacher did. So it was just like it opened my eyes to different things, and I read about Malcolm X and his ideas and everything, and I learned that he actually changed his mindset about integration. And it wasn't, at first he wasn't for it because his dad was murdered. And then when he went to
Islam.
He was Islamic.
He was Islam, but he went to Islam, right? Or he
where
went
they
to,
take their mosque. It's Mecca.
I think that's where he went, and he like saw like how many people were actually integrated. The white people were integrated, and it changed his mindset. And before he got to like change that, he was murdered. So like all we know is how he was like all for like Black Panther Party and like all that other stuff, and how he wasn't really for the peaceful movement. And then we don't really know how he changed his mindset, because he was like, there are white people that actually want to help us. So like it's really like crazy, because like we don't really, like Chris said, we don't really talk about the accomplishments that we have made, and like the Harlem Renaissance, how we started a lot of the music that we listen to today, and how we got white people to integrate with us and listen to the different types of music that we brought to New York. And so it's just, we got to educate people more about our history and how we changed some of the cultures.
Just to interject, they made it so you have to take an African American history lit class. It's one of the graduation requirements.
Yeah, starting with their class, it's now it's a graduation requirement for their class. But the classes that's leaving, it's not a graduation requirement.
Mine.
They don't encourage you to take those classes, which I think they should still encourage you to take those classes.
Okay, so let's touch back base on racial prejudice and stuff like that. So let me run you all through a scenario. So if a black person gets killed, right, let's say at the age of 17, right, he went to your high school and he was shot by an officer, but he was selling drugs, what would be the first thing to come to your mind?
If he was genuinely selling drugs, I want to know the situation in which he was shot and why he was shot.
And like also it depends on his predicament. So like people who are impoverished go to the first easy way to get money, because they're trying to help their family stay afloat. So like selling drugs is an easy way to make money, a lot of it. So I would want to know like his predicament and like what was the reason behind it. Why did they decide to like like arrest him and do that? Like, you know, was he retaliating in any way? Like, you know, just figure out like the backstory behind it, because we can so easily be like, oh, he was selling drugs, he deserves it, like, but you don't really know the backstory of why he was doing it. So that's what I would want.
Yeah, the first thing I would think of is, why was he doing it? That's my first thing. And then why was he in that situation? Like what Deja said.
So, and we also have to think about why exactly the cop couldn't reach for a taser instead of a gun. So, well, it's like, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Because most of the time officers don't really reach for their taser. It's usually the first thing, oh, I'm in a situation, now I gotta pull out my gun. So what type of training are officers getting where they feel the need that the gun is the first thing to grab?
My friend's dad is an officer. I remember he said something like they're not supposed to go for their gun first, and if they do, they're supposed to shoot in the leg, not upper body.
But we see it happening over and over again. So is the training the thing, or is it the person behind the training?
I think that all ties into the fear of colored people that's been instilled for generations upon generations, which is why they constantly put us down, because we would quote unquote steal their wives as slaves. And so I think it's just all instilled within the fear of people of color, that they instinctively go for their gun instead of their taser.
So sorry, I lost my train of thought. But I feel like not only the fear of the us black people, but just like the lack of knowledge. Like, so the fear is like, it ties into it, yes, but like the training, like Damari said, it's just like, who is behind all the trainings and what are they actually teaching them? Are they actually teaching them to like reach for their taser first, or do they actually teach them to reach for their gun? Because I heard that it's easier to go for the gun than it is for the taser, because you have to reach across your body for it. So it's just like the different trainings. Like, should we teach them how to reach across first or reach down first? So it's just that whole thing. I feel like it's the training piece of the whole thing instead of like the fear.
And to break off from that, I'll get to the reasoning to why I asked that question and put you all through that scenario. It was mainly to like identify your thought process based on matters that affect African Americans, because these are the things that really and truly happen right now. And the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is, an African American person would see it as, this person just got shot by a cop. Another black life lost. But based on a Caucasian person's perspective, they'd be like, okay, this person was selling drugs, right? It was wrong. So that's what I'm trying to put y'all through. Like, y'all need to see from both perspectives. But I'm glad to hear that y'all saw it from both perspectives, because y'all asked based on the officer and also based on the person that died. So yeah, good job.
So I have a question about the police and community relationship. How do you feel we can kind of change that narrative? Because we're always, so the fear factor, we're scared of police and police are scared of us. So how can we come together and like change that narrative where we can like play basketball with a police officer, or like go up and say hi and talk about our day?
Community events. I remember on my old street, I forgot the church, but they always have community events, and the officers would come in along with officers and firefighters, and they would come in and engage with the community. I think it was like a back to school thing, and they would have cookouts together, so they would be able to mingle with the community and get to know the people in the area.
Yeah, you're right. As long as you get to know the person who is the police officer or who is the person of color, then if you build that, it doesn't even have to be a deep relationship. If you build a relationship with them in general, then it'll help improve these police community relations. And that's all. I would like to thank y'all for tuning in to our podcast. It's been cool.
I'm Deja.
I'm Damari.
I'm Maya.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Jared.
Thank you.
Nobody told me how.